Gaming in South Africa is bigger than the music and the film industries combined. That is according to a report by professional services firm PwC. But apparently there's a lot holding South Africans back from becoming a dominant force in the global gaming arena. Ben Myres, the co-founder of a local game developer, Nyamakop, joins us now to chat about the successes and the challenges of gaming in the country. Ben, very good morning.
Good morning. It's very early.
It's late in the morning. Ben, good to see you. Good to talk to you. Now, in 2015 to 2019 report by PwC showed that the digital video games sector is one of the biggest success stories worth millions and millions and millions of rands. But how come it's all happening under the radar?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite fascinating. Games in general in Africa have been played on this continent for thousands of years. The oldest board game we've ever discovered is from 3100 BC from Egypt, and Mancala and Morabaraba, which are played all over South Africa and the continent. It's like been discovered from pre-colonial times. So video games are sort of just a natural evolution of that. And I think the reason it's sort of so under the radar is because a lot of the local game developers develop their work here and then sell it online to international partners to a lot of success. And only sort of 0.07% of the revenue comes from local people. So I think that's why it's so under the radar, but it's huge success.
I mean, you're talking about the development side of the. We're looking at some games at the present moment. So South Africans are coming up with their own ideas, developing these games. How do you market these games, and what platforms do you sell them on?
Yeah, so it really varies. These game developers make games for plentiful different platforms, whether it be mobile, PC, consoles like Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch. And then often what happens, because the internet can be such a equalizing factor, is that you can develop it here and then go to events overseas or put it online and talk to influencers and press overseas, and they will tell people about your game, and you can do it all from here in South Africa. So
what sort of skill sets are required for you to become a developer? We will talk about the gamers a little bit later on.
Well, I think there's a game designer who says games are every art form ever made interactive. It can be anything. It can be sculpture, it can be architecture, it can be art. So it's really a varied set of skills, right? You need to have programming, you need to do art, you need to do music, sound design, game design itself. But when making a game, it's pretty much so many things that if you're interested in games at all, there's probably a place for you in terms of making games.
Okay, talk to us about some of the biggest games coming out of South Africa.
Yeah, so there's a game called Broforce, which is sort of a parody of 80s and 90s American action movies, and that's developed in Cape Town, and that's sold over 1 million units on all platforms. There's a game called Desktop Dungeons, which has probably sold more than 100,000 units, and that's sold. And that won an award in 2010, beating out Minecraft, which is one of the highest selling games of all time. You also have a game called Viscera Cleanup Detail, which is a sort of parody of, again, American science fiction. And that's sold millions and millions of copies, and that's made by a group of brothers in Howick in KwaZulu-Natal. And then there's our own game from Nyamakop called Semblance, which became the first African-developed IP to ever launch on a Nintendo console, and it's been covered all around the world and played by people everywhere.
When you're saying sold, how much are you selling these games for?
So it can vary quite a lot. It can be anywhere between $5 and $15 for independent games. So Broforce sold about $15. Our game, Semblance, sold at about $10. So it can vary quite a lot. So when you're talking about those figures, it can add up quite a lot, especially when you're earning in dollars.
It actually really does if you're selling over a million copies of your game. Okay, let's talk about the gamers themselves, because that's a whole other entity on its own, because now you've got professional gamers. You've got millions and millions of people tuning in to watch people actually play games against each other. It's just a whole new, it's a new world that I don't know about it. You live in it, but tell us about it.
It's completely crazy. I think there's one very large competitive game called League of Legends, and last year they released their viewership stats, and it was about 100 million people watching the final, which is slightly less than the National Football League Super Bowl.
100 million people
100
watching.
Million people, yeah.
And this is teams. You got games. You got gamers in teams, or is it individuals?
It's it depends on the sport, but a lot of the most popular ones are team-based, so teams of 5 playing against each other. And in places like South Korea, these sort of competitive games have been a long time. They have, stadiums that people go in to watch the game. I think the South Korean team, when they played at the World Cup, they brought in the best League of Legends players to visit the football team in the locker room to get them hyped for the match rather than the other way around. So there's countries in the world where esports is a bigger deal than like other sports. So.
Okay, so I must let my son play his PlayStation.
Definitely.
That's basically what you're saying. Ben, thank you so much for coming in and talking about your company. It's called Nyamakop, right?
Yes.
And you're based in Cape Town?
Johannesburg.
In Johannesburg as well, okay. And your partner is a Kenyan as well. Doing amazing stuff, putting South Africa on the map in terms of developing games.